Hi, am I recording? I think I'm recording. Hi, welcome to my Compound Life. This is a channel where we build assets, we build habits, and of course, we build freedom. And that should really be financial freedom for you, for me, and for whomever watches my channel, to be honest. This is another episode of Bitcoin Daily. So if you're into Bitcoin, if you're into compounding assets for your life, and then achieving that financial time freedom, as well as money freedom, do hit the like, hit subscribe, and let me know who you are in the comment section. So today is the 3rd of January, the 3rd day of 2026. Great day, by the way, in the UK, in the West Midlands. So I think after today, I'm going to head out and have fun. Stop looking at charts for once. So right now, at the time of recording, Bitcoin is trading around $89,400 to about $90,000. And for the time being, Bitcoin is, $89,800. Small change. Slightly, you know what? It's a good change. It's a big change to 4 hours chart. I think in the past couple of hours. So in the past 24 hours, it went up a small 1.4% to about 2%. Oh, it went up pretty big. We gotten back onto the 90,000 resistance previously. But certainly, we kind of have to hold that, right? Otherwise, as long as we can hold that resistance of 90,000, we can definitely go more upwards, maybe go beyond 95,000, right? But for now, let's hope we continue to have that positive momentum and continue to go beyond 90,000 and maintain that. So if we kind of look through the 4 hours time frame, you know what that's telling us? It's essentially we are, we are in the breakout period now, right? So for us to get from about 87,000 to about 90,000 a couple of hours ago, essentially, we hit the breakout zone, and we simply just need Bitcoin to hold that 90,000 to 95,000 and see whether we can continue to be bullish or bearish. So it can go both ways. So in the past 24 hours, it really does show, although it's a small gain, but it does indicate that buyers are coming back. And in the short term, I think it's bullish for Bitcoin. A small pump can definitely bring some hope to individuals, or especially retails like you and I. Of course, it does seem that it was another manipulation, because as soon as we hit about 90,000, immediately we kind of drop within that 4 hours time frame. Market makers are definitely at it again, liquidated well over $323 million worth of short. And of course, if we look at the 50 days moving average, it is around, let's call it $90,000 right now for the 50 days simple moving average. And definitely, we are seeing a lot of profit taking between 90,000 to about 95,000. So we need to really hold here, at least at the 90,000 range, and then slowly grind up, and then breaking that 95,000. Another barrier before we can further move along. Otherwise, this seemed to be the final dead cat bounce until much later this year. So I think yesterday I spoke about potentially we are going through a bear market, and bear market for Bitcoin tends to be around 12 months period, and so far we are at around nearing 3 months already. So we'll see. Some might still argue that we are not in the Bitcoin 4-year cycle. We'll also get into that in just a moment. So quick look at the fear and greed index. Today we are at 30. Yesterday we were at 27. So for past 7 days we stayed in mainly fear zone with 5 out of the 7 days for the week. And of course, I think for the months, we are more at the fear zone now than at the extreme fear zone, unlike November's period, right? So I think we are slowly coming out from that bearish situation, but it doesn't mean we are going all in bullish yet. So until we can secure back that 50 days moving average of around 90,000, which is continuously dropping, so bear that in mind. So this is a zone, although we have the current Bitcoin price has, exceeded the 50 days moving average. However, this is a zone where a lot of traders, investors are taking profit, believing that, this could be the final dead cat bounce. We can definitely have another dead cat bounce that goes back up to about 100,000, but do bear in mind that a lot of weaker hands that doesn't want to hold Bitcoin for that long of a period of time, or wanted to rotate Bitcoin into gold or silver, this is where they are rotating right now. So bear that in mind. Until we can secure that at least 90,000 for another few more days, and then slowly grind back up to about 95,000. I don't foresee Bitcoin to be any more bullish after. Okay, so that's the price action. Let's take a quick look at Bitcoin ETF inflow or outflow for the 2nd of January. Okay, so for 2nd of January, it's very bullish. Bitcoin had an inflow of well over $471 million. Okay, so this is definitely a reverse from recent outflow trend. As you can see, previously it was 31st of December, it was like 348 million. Although 30th of December was positive inflow, bullish. However, everything got wiped off again as soon as the 31st of December kicked in. And of course, some of the biggest buyer of Bitcoin are, IBIT from BlackRock, $287 million worth of Bitcoin. Fidelity, $88.1 million. Bitwise, about $41.5 million worth of Bitcoin. And of course, if we look at the weekly chart, we have very, very limited trading days for this week. It's very, very bullish. As you can see, we are definitely improving with this specific week. It was a total of $458 million worth of Bitcoin inflow versus last week it was negative outflow of $782 million. The week before was about $497 million worth of outflow. So it does seem we are progressing. Things are improving, right? And there are more macro news to look forward to, so that's why it's giving investors reconsideration, and of course more investors, traders, they are coming back from their holiday, and they do tend to see Bitcoin, maybe there are more positive macro news, so that's why they want to place their bets on Bitcoin. And of course, certainly we haven't gotten back to the best weeks of ETF inflows, just a recap, the best week of ETF inflow was around 3.2 billion USD, as well as 2.71 billion USD, versus this week was a mere 458 million. Okay, so still plenty to do for Bitcoin. And then moving on to Ethereum. Ethereum for the Jan 2nd, 2026, it was also bullish, inflow of 175 million for Ethereum. So that's good. And of course, Ethereum, if we look through weekly basis, I think weekly for this week, it's all positive at 160 million worth of Ethereum ETF inflow. And of course, similar situation to Bitcoin. For the past 2 weeks, it was mainly bearish. So last week, it was at 102 million outflow. The week before was at 643 million worth of $1 million worth of outflow. And of course, for Ethereum to get back into earlier good inflow, right? At the peak in one of the week in August, Ethereum actually received well over 2.85 billion worth of inflow, right? Versus this week, we are only at 160 million. So plenty of room for Ethereum to get to. Oh no, hang on, that's Ethereum. Is that Ethereum? Yes. Okay, let's move on to Solana Sol ETF. Sol ETF was at 8.6 million inflow, so positive, bullish for Sol. I think Sol has been doing tremendously well, to be honest. So if you kind of look through the daily chart, I think the only times that Sol actually had any outflow was on the 3rd of December, the 1st of December, as well as the 26th of November. And the outflow was actually really tiny, right? So this week for Sol ETF, it has received well over 10 million, just call it 10 million USD worth of inflow compared to the week before. I think a lot of it was due to less trading days. Week before was around 13 million, and before that was about 66 million, right? But overall, if we look at monthly, I think Sol did pretty well. Minimal trading days in December, it did well over 147 million monthly inflow. For November, it was around 419 million inflow, and for October, it was 199 million worth of inflow. So I think, in a way, Solana, I think it actually beat Ethereum for the monthly inflow. So for December, for December, so was around 176. Yeah, Ethereum was like all outflows for December. But anyway, so good for Sol, for continuously delivering, I guess. So if we quickly scan through the Bitcoin return chart, right? So Q4 2025, we return approximately Bitcoin about negative 23%, right? So not too good. And for the whole of December, as you can see, it's it's also negative 2.97. However, it seemed for January 2026, we almost completely recuperated from our December loss, right? So December about 2.97 negative, and then we're nearing about 2.17 positive, right? So in a way, Bitcoin has, in a way, I think this is what everyone are saying, right? I think I'm kind of also, thinking about this, pondering whether, have we really broken out from the 4-year cycle, right? Because Bitcoin has the 4-year cycle. It held that for well over 14 years. So I think a lot of people are calling that the 4-year cycle is broken. So let me quickly explain why it is broken, right? So historically, Bitcoin follow a very clear pattern that the halving years, right? So let me bring this up a bit. So for the halving year, it usually ended green. The year after the halving will, of course, go even higher. Then came a big top and a deep bear market. So rightfully, bear market should be starting right now, which I'm kind of having the feeling that, if we cannot get through that 90 to 95,000 barriers, and very likely, yes, we're starting with the bear markets. And of course, the 4 years halving event definitely held for over a decade. But many believe that this time around is different. For 2024, because the halving year finished strong, right? It should finish strong, but it hasn't finished strong. But 2025, we essentially closed in red, okay, instead of pushing higher, right? So rightfully, we should really be going a lot more higher from October until about December, and have some sort of a blow off top for Bitcoin sometime in December. However, it kind of, the whole progression kind of halt sometime in October the 8th. And then ever since, we are kind of going through a bear market, right? And this has never happened before. And of course, we cannot say that because of the 4-year cycle is broken, this is why Bitcoin is weak. What's changed is what's actually moved the Bitcoin price. So in the early days, Bitcoin was driven mainly by halving supply shock, right? It will still happen. The supply shock still happen in a few more years' time. And in the early years, it was mainly retail speculations, where retail investors would just hodl for a few years, maybe for 4 years, and then sell the top, right? So there wouldn't be much kind of like rebalancing, rotating or whatsoever, right? They just have full conviction on Bitcoin. They just buy and hold and sell the top, right? However, today, Bitcoin behaves more like a institution class macro type of assets, right? It's driven by liquidity and, of course, money supply, right? So, and it needs that because, look at the Bitcoin price right now. It's about 89,000, 90,000, right? It's not $1,000 or $500 anymore that, that anyone can just come in and buy, right? So it does need that liquidity and a lot of it, a lot of the money supply, right? And of course, it's driven a lot by the interest rate, and it needs to go beyond retail investors. It needs that institutional buying in order for the price to continue to be sustained, to go up more, right? So, and it kind of follows the broader economic cycle is all I can say. So all of this has, and taking into consideration when it becomes more of an institutional asset class, it will have a lot more of the portfolio rebalancing. So I guess the blow off top has now been capped in a way. The halving still matters, of course, but its impact is now smaller. Okay, so bear that in mind. Meaning no more blow off top, no more Bitcoin down 70, 75, 80% down correction. So back in 2012, the halving cut supply by thousands of Bitcoin per day. So in 2024, the supply cut was only a few hundred. So instead of a neat 4-year rhythm, Bitcoin now moves in longer liquidity driven cycles, right? So it's all down to driven by liquidity, as you know, in the system, as opposed to just a few retail investors buying and selling. So this cycle isn't broken, right? You can deem this as Bitcoin is maturing into an institutional asset class, and it will most certainly have less volatility, or perhaps less of a gain or drops. But of course, taking into consideration that this asset class, Bitcoin, still have one of the best CAGR out there. So yeah, I think my take is continue to invest and buy and hodl whenever we've been given the opportunity. If you're new to Bitcoin, I think this would be a good time to re-enter. But of course, don't go all in. It's always about pound cost average or dollar cost average. That would be the best way to buy Bitcoin. Okay, so looking at news that can move Bitcoin price, right? So I think this is taken from 24/7 Wall Street news that Fed plan 4 interest rate cuts in 2026. So there are still a lot of speculation that Fed will continue with the interest rate cut. And to be honest, I've kind of also looked through Polymarkets, the prediction market. It doesn't seem we will be getting any more cuts in January, at least from the prediction market. I think even for a 25 basis point, it has now dropped to about 10 or 11%. I think looking at the recent data that came in, it just doesn't trigger Feds want to have more rate cuts. So bear that in mind until we've got more rate cut. So rate cut itself isn't enough to even push the Bitcoin price even higher, right? It has to do with liquidity, and that liquidity usually needs to come from Fed's printing, right? Although in the past 2 days, I've covered this in the Bitcoin Daily video, we did see Fed continue to apply some small amount of quantitative easing, but that's expected, right? That's just closing the year, and then they needed more QE. That doesn't mean the US Fed are printing excessively. So for that, I wouldn't consider that that will be immediate positive for Bitcoin. Okay, another news that I think have impacted the Bitcoin price a little bit. Let me see, time of recording right now, we're still about 89,800. Okay, so US attack on Venezuela. So this is kind of like, if you're on X, you see a lot of news headline, videos, etc., right? So report US airstrike on Venezuela, heaps of explosion. So background, Venezuela have oil, crypto used for sanction to avoid sanction, basically. So I think any war news will be bad, because essentially people will be selling risk asset off first thing, right? So US market is currently closed because it's the Wednesday, of course, right? So I do kind of see maybe by Monday market open, there might be some sell off. But for the immediate market, Bitcoin and crypto market, what I'm seeing around 7 a.m. this morning when I've first heard about the Venezuela news, immediately Bitcoin dropped below 90,000, right? But it certainly did well in recovering back to about 89,000 right now. But I think any news do have the anticipation that, this isn't just a short-term thing, right? Potentially this can last slightly longer and have pretty negative implication on Bitcoin and a lot of other growth assets for the coming few weeks or months. So bear that in mind. And of course, another news. I hope this will be a very, very positive news, actually. Metal, gold, silver price plummet, right? Are investors rotating all of this into Bitcoin right now? So that's the whole argument, right? So in this week, Bitcoin pump about 6%, right? While gold has done, I think more than 4%, maybe 4.5%, less than 5%, right? And important thing to remember is that the last time Bitcoin started its parabolic rally was after gold made the top, right? So I'm kind of guessing gold at 4,550 was the top for gold. This could be the start of money rotation from gold to Bitcoin, or from metal to Bitcoin in general. So let's not even forget about silver, as silver already crashed almost 16%. Silver is kind of heavily manipulated, right? So on 29th of December, I think silver crashed almost 16% or 18%, I can't remember, but in just a short 24 hours. Essentially wiping out over 600 billions in market value. And what we're seeing in silver right now follows a very, very, very familiar pattern, right? First, silver started rising fast because real demand increased, physical supply became tight. Then suddenly prices were smashed down. This usually doesn't happen in the physical market. It happens in paper market. So there you go, a lot of leverage, right? So silver actually trades in two completely different markets. One is the paper silver. These are the futures and derivatives traded on COMEX, COMEX. And the other market is the physical silver market, the real metal that people buy, right, and hold. So on COMEX, silver trades around $70 to $73 per ounce, but physical silver prices around the world tell a very different story, because in Japan, it's selling at around $130 per ounce. In China, they're selling at around $80 to $85 an ounce. India, around $110 an ounce, right? So as you can see, that's a premium of $10 to about $60 per ounce over paper prices. And what that really tells us is paper price, silver is cheap, whereas physical market says silver is very, very scarce, right? So in a normal market, this gap shouldn't exist, to be honest. The reason it does this is simple. The paper silver market is hugely leveraged, right? For every 1 ounce of real silver, there are over 400 ounces of paper contracts. So this means prices can be pushed down with paper selling even when real silver is scarce. When silver started rising too fast, of course, margin requirement on silver futures were raised, and that was actually raised twice in just a few days, right? So these force traders using leverage to either put in more cash or sell their position, resulting in a huge liquidation. That selling crushed the price, and the key point here, right, that I'm trying to drive here, right? This does not fix the physical silver shortage. It only pushes the price down temporarily. We've seen this before between 2008 and 2016. Traders at JP Morgan were caught manipulating gold and silver futures, right? This was proven in court. They did it by placing large fake orders to move prices, executing a real trades on the other side, canceling the fake orders, triggering other traders to react, repeating this process again and again, and we're seeing it this time around too, right? So in 2020, JP Morgan paid $920 million in fines for precious metal manipulation, right? But they actually receive well over, I don't know how many billions, 9 billions worth of revenue from just doing that. So this case proved one thing, right? Big banks have used paper markets to control metal prices before, and we are essentially seeing JP Morgan did something similar to MicroStrategy. So recently we saw a very familiar pattern for MSTR, strong real demand, but heavy paper pressure pushing prices down. Every major metal, gold and silver rally in history follows the same pattern, right? So bear that in mind. So yeah, I think, you know, what indicates this, big institution, they'll just walk away with billions that they made through this kind of manipulation, and they only pay a small fine, and no one goes into jail for all of this price manipulation, right? So guys, for silver cycle, if you do hold silver, right, be very, very careful, right? Because it does seem the manipulation, it's very real. Usually big institutions, they just manage to walk out with millions of dollars made, and retail investors like you and I will probably have to hold on to our silver bag. I don't have any silver bag, but if you do, be careful, because very likely you're going to have to hold that for many, many more years. And in silver cycle, it takes about 10 to 20 years at least to recover, right? Whereas in Bitcoin, it takes us about 4 years, 5 years max. I mean, specifically for this cycle, it'll be about 5 years. But Bitcoin generally goes, take about 1 year to recover from the bear cycle, and then it runs about 3 years worth of bull cycle, right? And in our case right now, it will be 4 years. So essentially the whole cycle takes about 5 years. Drop your comment if you're still buying silver, or do you prefer buying Bitcoin, right? Let us know in the comment section. And let's move on to other interesting news. US Bitcoin news. Anti-crypto SEC Commissioner Caroline Crenshaw leaves SEC, so that's good. Now that we've got more pro-Bitcoin and crypto government in the US, hopefully a lot of adoptions will be accelerated. And other news. Okay, one interesting one that I'll cover in the UK. It's a UK Bitcoin news. British XCE company use Bitcoin as treasury and plan to list on the UK stock exchange. So background, XCE is a recruitment firm. They'll buy Bitcoin with cash. They attract talent with it. First UK firm to also following strategy footsteps. So I think that's very, very, very good for the UK market. Although there are a lot of saying that the UK market, it's terrible because HMRC, they're going to come after your Bitcoin. Yes, I do think that's very bad. However, you know what? We simply just need to have more adoption. Just buy Bitcoin and don't sell, hodl. Maybe next time you can get a loan with it, right? That's not bad either. Getting a loan against your collaterals. We can't do it right now yet in the UK, but potentially in the future we can, right? In that case, maybe in the future, you don't even have to pay, your capital gain tax for selling your Bitcoin, right? Essentially, you use your Bitcoin as collaterals and get loans with it. Okay. More hopium news. If you guys love hopium, there's a guy called Young Hoon Kim. Okay, he himself claimed to be the highest IQ person on earth, right? He predicts that Bitcoin will get to 276,000 by February 2026. I'm not sure whether that's hopium. If it is, great, fantastic. We've got our hodl back, we've got our swing back, and we can really decide whether we want to sell or buy, whatever tickles your fancy. And more hopium news, a large whale recently, I think a couple of hours ago, he or she long $800 million, right? So this insider whale opened us $800 million long on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. Okay, so that's very good. It gives a lot more confidence back into the market. And one last hopium that I want to cover before we end the day. It's this one. Can you guys see this? Okay. I just want to let you guys know how scarce it is for Bitcoin, right? So this specific chart by Hodl 15 Capital, it's saying that the number of Bitcoin supply, newly minted Bitcoin, for the past 2 years, right? So this one talks about how many Bitcoin got minted or got mined. Some people call it mined Bitcoin. I call them minted sometime, right? So in total, right, for the 2 years, 384,000 Bitcoin were minted between January 2024 until the December 2025, right? 384,000 Bitcoin. Not USD, but Bitcoin. Number of Bitcoin. Remember that there are only 21 million worths of Bitcoin, right? And global ETF, right? So these are the BlackRock. Why do I cover all of the BlackRock ETF inflow and outflow news? Because it gives you indication of whether markets are buying or selling, and that will also impact on the Bitcoin price, right? So from a global ETF's perspective, for the 2 years, they have bought up over 715,000 worth of Bitcoin, right? And for MicroStrategy, the company that's owned by Michael Saylor Strategy, right? They bought well over 483,000. And other public companies, like just now I've covered that, what's that company? XCR or something? XCE company, so all of these companies, they are building their own treasuries, etc. They bought well over 205,000, right? So imagine that. How big of a supply shock will be coming for Bitcoin? 384,000 mined for the 2 years. And with these three big segments, already bought well over 1.4 million worths of Bitcoin. Okay, and that's excluding you and I, retail investors buying in the exchanges, right? So supply shock is coming, so bear that in mind. HODL, DCA, don't go all in. Pound cost average buy, that's the best strategy for Bitcoin. And that's it for today. I hope you like my new setup. It's a rather new setup that I'm doing. Yeah, I'm still like trying to fiddle and going through things slowly. But anyway, I hope you like today's video. Drop a like, hit subscribe, let me know in the comment section, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.